You'll never catch me being rude to restaurant servers. Whether I'm pulling up to a drive-thru or sitting down in a fancy restaurant, I'm polite, I smile, and I don't skimp on the tip because I once waited tables, and I was terrible. It was a little German restaurant on Clarkson Road, and although I had no restaurant experience, the owner hired me, a decision I'm sure she quickly came to regret. I mixed up orders, I dropped the cutlery, and I forgot to put the filter in before brewing a very large urn of coffee. So it was to my great relief, and likely hers, when I quit to take a job at the Petro-Canada refinery on Southdown Road, where my dad worked. That fall would mark the 45th anniversary of the refinery, and company officials wanted to spruce the place up a bit in advance of the tour. So they hired me and 4 other teens to paint the posts, barriers, and pipes that were on the path of the open house bus tour. I was given a hard hat, brown coveralls that were way too big for me, work boots, and a paintbrush, and told to start painting. Our base of operations was the maintenance department, a single-story building located across from the asphalt plant and near the welding shop. One day, a couple of tradesmen walked in, their arms filled with lilacs. The smell of springtime filled the office, which, considering our proximity to the asphalt plant, was no mean feat. Where did all these flowers come from, I asked. From the old Crescent, long abandoned, located in the northeast corner of the property, just across the fence from the Bradley House Museum. I asked to see it, and so on one of my breaks, I found myself standing on an old semicircle road, the asphalt cracked and covered in weeds, the only evidence that people had once lived here. I walked up to one of the old front steps leading to a cement foundation amidst the overgrown lilac bushes and thought, so this is where my family's story begins. Welcome to We Built This City, Episode 7, Building Suburbia. British American Oil Company was neither British nor American. It was 100% Canadian, founded in Toronto in 1907 by Canadian businessmen Albert Ellsworth and Silas Parsons. BA's first major expansion was to Montreal, and in the mid-1930s, the company started to explore constructing a refinery in the farming community of Clarkson on the shores of Lake Ontario. But history intervened. In 1939, war was declared, and 2 years later, the government of William Lyon Mackenzie King came calling. It needed the Clarkson refinery built ASAP, but not to produce gasoline. It needed aviation fuel. The British Commonwealth Air Training Plan was prepping pilots for the war effort at bases across the country, including at the newly opened Malton Airport, 30 kilometers northeast of Clarkson. More than 10,000 planes were required for the war effort, and they all needed fuel. The new BA oil refinery in Clarkson opened to much fanfare on November 15, 1943. It was one of the world's most modern refineries, and the only refinery in North America that didn't make gasoline. It exclusively made aviation fuel and lubricants for planes. BA also built housing. It had to in order to attract the skilled workers it needed to operate the refinery, which was located 35 kilometers west of downtown Toronto. Marigold Village, with its 50 homes built on a crescent, was located about 50 yards south of where Clarkson Road South meets Orr Road. BA Oil maintained Marigold Crescent from 1943 to 1964 for its employees and their families. My parents moved onto the Crescent in 1956 and stayed for the remaining 8 years. On maps, it's called Marigold Village, but to my parents and everyone who lived there, it was always just the Crescent. Their first home in Mississauga had been an apartment above a convenience store in Port Credit. Rent was $80 a month. My sister Kathy took her first steps there. But in spring 1956, with my mom expecting my sister Carolyn, my dad went to BA's HR department and asked to be considered for a house on Marigold Crescent. They moved into a bungalow shortly after that. It had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a bathroom, and a living room, and the Silverwoods Dairy milkman dropped bottles of milk in the milk chute by the basement door. Rent was $48 a month, almost half what my parents had been paying in Port Credit. And because the homes were owned by the refinery, my parents' rent never increased, and they had no other fees. Electricity, property taxes, and all maintenance costs were covered by BA. The company employed a man full-time to maintain the homes on Marigold Crescent. He painted the clapboard houses, fixed what was broken, and restocked the coal chutes. That's right, the oil refinery's employees' housing was heated with coal. For my parents and the other young families, Marigold Crescent was a special place. Because all the men knew each other from work and Marigold Crescent wasn't part of a larger subdivision, the families formed a strong bond. They had corn roasts and picnics. The stay-at-home moms would get together at each other's homes for morning coffee visits and walk to the end of the Crescent each afternoon to meet the school bus as it dropped off their children. The company built a ball field for baseball in the summer and an ice rink in the winter. The kids would play on it until it was time for bed, and then at 10 p.m., the men, my dad included, would go out on it for games of shinny. Afterwards, they'd flood the rink so it would freeze overnight and be ready for the kids the next day. When BA Oil decided to shut down Marigold Crescent, they gave families a year's notice. Some, like my parents, moved into one of the new subdivisions popping up in Clarkson and Lauren Park. A few families opted to relocate their physical house, and today 3 of the original Marigold homes sit on Orr Road, while a 4th is located across the street from Canadian Tire on the east side of Southdown Road. Reminders of how the story of Suburbia began to take shape in the fields west of Toronto. If Brickyard Village in Cooksville, Victory Village in Malton, and Marigold Village in Clarkson was the prologue, Applewood Acres was Chapter 1. In the 1800s, the land south of Dundas Road wasn't all that coveted by settlers. The soil was too sandy to grow hay for livestock or valuable grain to feed the gristmills that lined the Credit River. It wasn't until around 1900 that farmers discovered the sandy soil was perfect for growing fruit trees, and in particular apples. Orchards weren't the only thing beginning to flourish in early 20th century Ontario. Automobiles were rolling in at a frenetic pace. In 1906, there were 1,000 motor cars in Ontario. By 1925, there were 200,000, causing major congestion on Lakeshore Road each weekend. In response, the provincial government announced a new road, twice as wide as Lakeshore, which would be built between Toronto and Burlington. Work began in 1931. Then, in 1934, Robert Smith, the Deputy Minister of Highways, ordered the building of a dual-lane divided highway, modeled after the German autobahns, and he ordered the middle road be converted. At the same time, Canada's first highway interchange was built, where the new highway intersected with Highway 10, Hurontario Road. When the Middle Road Highway opened in 1937, it was the first intercity divided highway in North America. In 1940, it got a new name, the Queen Elizabeth Way. And it was while driving along the Queenie past the apple orchards near Cawthra Avenue that a 20-something Herald ship got an idea. The year was 1950, and the post-war baby boom was in full swing. Harold's father, Gordon Ship, of GS Ship & Son Limited, had made a name for himself, building homes in East York before expanding to Etobicoke. Now Harold wanted to build something even bigger,
Let's not just build homes,
he thought,
let's build a whole town.
and he already had a name picked out: Applewood Acres. On January 21st, 1951, Harold's 25th birthday, he and his father purchased 23 acres south of the Queenie for $43,000. And that is where they paved the first street, Applewood Road, and got to work building their first 108 homes. Harold, a natural showman, then got to work marketing Applewood Acres to families in Toronto. He built the model home in the midst of an orchard in bloom and furnished it with life-size mannequins, a dad, a mom, and a couple of kids. He took out full-page ads in the newspaper, the first home builder to do so. He rented airplanes to fly advertising banners above the city. And for a Christmas-time promotion, he tied a big red bow around a house. Sales went through the roof. Young families in Toronto were eager to purchase a single-family home on a large lot. The houses ranged in price from $16,000 to $18,000. The Ships sold 126 homes in 10 days. The era of the suburb had begun, launched by the Ships. After Applewood Acres, the Ships built Applewood Heights and Applewood Hills across an area that stretched all the way north to Burnhamthorpe and extended from Cawthra to Etobicoke Creek. The Ships ended up building close to 900 homes on either side of the highway, along with a neighborhood school, parks, and the Applewood Village Shopping Centre. At the time, it was the largest single subdivision built by a family developer in Canada. In 1973, Harold Shipp built a 26-story, 400-unit apartment building, the highest high-rise in the soon-to-be city of Mississauga. For his new subdivision in Streetsville, Harold came up with his most audacious promotion yet. In addition to being a home builder, Harold also co-owned a car dealership. One day, he placed 3 cars on the roof of 3 model homes, 1 car for each roof. When the local planning commissioner told him he needed to remove the cars because they violated a sign bylaw, Harold refused. The cars weren't billboards, he argued. The cars stayed, and photos of the stunt were published as far away as Japan. Then Harold got to work dreaming up a center for his city. He began to assemble farmland in the areas north of Burnhamthorpe and west of Huron, Ontario. On it, he built Mississauga's first high-rise commercial development, an office park known as the Mississauga Executive Centre. 4 towers of light gray mirrored glass that ranged in height from 8 to 18 stories. They opened in 1978 across from the city of Mississauga's original City Hall and the Square One shopping centre. The center of the city was beginning to take shape. Harold Shipp died in 2014 and later that year was inducted into Mississauga's Legends Row. If the expansion of the Queenie was the inspiration for Mississauga's first subdivision, it was the airport that prompted another developer's dreams of a new city to take flight. As Canada was beginning to boom with babies and buildings in the 1950s, the old Malton Airport was undergoing some significant changes. In 1958, it was renamed Toronto International Airport, and over the next few years set about to construct new terminals, runways, and facilities to accommodate the rising number of commercial airline passengers setting off for elsewhere in the country and the world. Bruce McLaughlin took note. In 1960, he convinced the Carr family to sell him their farm on the northwest corner of Burnhamthorpe Road and Huron, Ontario Street, which they continued to farm until 1963. And McLaughlin continued to purchase land. By 1973, his company, S.B. McLaughlin Associates, owned 4,000 acres in what is now Mississauga's central core, stretching east-west from Cawthra to Wolfdale and north-south from the 401 to Burnhamthorpe Road. McLaughlin was at heart a planning nerd. He envisioned a community of 125,000 people living in everything from high-rises to single-family homes, with a plethora of jobs and activities via industrial, commercial, and retail businesses clustered nearby. He sold that vision to 5 Canadian financial firms that invested a combined $38 million for a 50% stake in what McLaughlin called the Mississauga City Development Project, which set out to develop 2,600 of McLaughlin's 4,000 acres. First to be constructed were 4 office towers, which housed McLaughlin's office and Mississauga's municipal offices for the town about to become a city. McLaughlin pledged to build 35,000 housing units within 7 years, enough for those 125,000 people. At the time, demand for single-family homes was soaring at an average price of $45,000, which would be just under $313,000 in today's dollars. Prices were on the rise because of demand. Toronto's growing and affluent middle class were looking to move out of smaller Toronto homes and began looking west for homes with backyards and nearby parks to raise their kids. This growth coincided with the loosening of immigration restrictions, which saw a rise in the number of newcomers landing at the airport, looking for jobs, homes, and a new life in Ontario. Real estate agents catered to these new arrivals with ads that touted the wonders of the brand new city to the west.
Reside free for 6 months,
promised an ad in a Portuguese paper.
Most of the homes are located quite far from the main arteries so that you may feel as being living in a rural area, although you are actually at the heart of one of the most fast-growing metropolitan areas.
At the center of all this activity rose Square One. When it opened on October 3, 1973, at a cost of $45 million, Square One was the 3rd largest shopping mall in the world, and the largest in Canada, with 170 stores across 1 million square feet of retail space on 2 floors of air-conditioned comfort. In the center was Garden Court, with a bandshell, fountains, cinemas, where I think I saw Star Wars, and a skating rink in winter. It was originally anchored by Dominion's grocery store, The Bay, Simpson Sears, where my mom worked as a switchboard operator, and Woolco, which had 4,700 stores worldwide, decided to build the largest here in Mississauga. Why go big in Mississauga? Because as Chris Skeets, Woolworth's real estate director, told the Toronto Star, quote,
"It is the boomingest area of Canada."
And boom it did. In 1982, the city held a national architectural competition to design and build a new city hall that reflected, quote,
"A period of rapid growth during which a rural hinterland has been transformed into one of the fastest growing centers in Canada."
The winning design, selected from 246 submissions, came from architects Michael Kirkland and Edward Jones. Both were from elsewhere, Kirkland from the US and Jones from Great Britain. And Jones had always been struck by the ubiquity of Ontario's farmhouses with their silos, barns, and tree-lined drives. And so they offered the new city a fresh take on its history, modern lines that reflected the old family farm. The main building, with large central doors and sloping roof, looks like a stretched-out barn, complete with a hayloft window beneath the peak. Rising behind it is the farmhouse, now office tower, a clock tower to resemble the weather vane, and the old grain silo, now city council chambers. The building opened in July 1987, and today is considered one of the best examples of postmodern architecture in Canada. In 1991, the Mississauga Central Library was added to the site, and in 2021, it was renamed the Hazel McCallion Central Library. In late 2023, it completed a major renovation that created a 4-floor sky lounge, increased public spaces, and became completely barrier-free. The latest addition to the city's central public space was Celebration Square in 2011. A multi-purpose, state-of-the-art outdoor venue that includes a main stage, amphitheater, trellised market area, green space, large reflecting pool, and a central fountain that converts into an ice rink in winter. The square attracts over 750,000 people each year and plays host to hundreds of free events and festivals. All of it a hop, skip, and a jump from Square One, which has grown alongside the city. Today, it is the largest mall in Ontario, with over 2 million square feet of retail space. It hosts about 350 stores, a number of restaurants and dining options, including the food district that feels like walking through a mercantile city market, with 25 merchants offering food from around the world and weekly pop-up surprises at the district kitchen. Square One welcomes over 20 million customers each year. From the builders who imagined a city rising amidst apple orchards and wheat fields, to the families who moved here to work, shop, and plant lilacs on Marigold. Together, they have all built this city.
It took a lot of people and stories to build Mississauga into what it is today, Canada's 6th largest city. Come visit us across our social platforms and on our website at visitmississauga.ca.
You've been listening to a Podstarter production.